Great. Good idea. We're live. Good evening. It's Monday, October 15. This is a meeting of the Council Rock School District Board of School Directors Policy Committee, and we have 3 board members. I'm the chair, Ed Tate, and we have
Marianne McKee, School Board.
Andy Block, School Board. And we have 2 administrators with us, Matt Fredrickson, as always, who so ably staffs this committee. Thank you, Matt. And our special guest star of the evening is Christine Taylor. Ms. Taylor, we're going to start first, I guess, with one from Matt, Public Records.
Yes, sir. And actually, before we start, I did want to note that policies, the 300s, 400s, and 500s, which used to recognize the separate bargaining units or the classification of employees, have all been combined now into just the 300s. So as we go through these policies, the numbers have shifted slightly in terms of what they were numbered before, and we are policies to retire, and I apologize, I didn't print any of these out, are the old 303, 305, 315, 415, 515, 316, 318.2, 327, 348.1, 448.1, 548.1, 416, 429/529. These are all policies that have either been superseded by new policies or incorporated into other policies. Therefore, the numbers are no longer valid.
And we didn't need to get them printed out anyway. Thank you.
How many net policies are we?
Hiring, 14.
Good. Thank you. That's a good thing. And people may or may not know, PSBA has been managing this process for us under contract at a rather modest expense. So a lot of it's driven, we'll refer to PSBA from time to time. Pennsylvania School Boards Association staff has been assisting us on this process. So the first one for tonight is 801.
Yes, sir. Public record. This, the only change to this policy is slight wording change. Delegation of responsibility. We simply inserted the board shall designate superintendent and/or his/her designee as the open records officer, just to reflect what we're actually doing in practice.
Who is that, Dr. Elliott?
Actually, it's Susan O'Grady.
Oh, okay, sure.
That makes good sense. We've done that with other policies too.
Yes.
The superintendent doesn't have to take every issue from the district. That's it?
Yes, sir.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, we will move 801 forward to consideration by the full board. 104.
Sorry, yeah, I got one question as we're going through.
Yeah.
So we're around fees.
Oh,
Unfortunately, those are dictated by law.
Everything?
If we can make, how did Rob Cox explain to me? If we can make a reasonable representation that is undue cost to the district, we can charge for it.
other comment? Okay. We'll move 801 on then to the full board. 104 is affirmative action program for employment contract practices. This begins a set of numerous policies that Ms. Taylor is going to tell us about.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
All mine are job.
So I want to start out by saying that Rob Cox actually reviewed this particular policy when we did 103 around a year ago.
Yes.
Joanna Sumner from East Vernon Gray was very involved, so we elected to involve the law firm again with looking over this policy and providing us with their feedback. So you'll notice that the language, this process that we have in 103 is mirrored here in 104. And you can scroll through and see on the screen in different colors and on the printout in front of you, bolded and underlined are the changes that Mr. Cox recommended and made to the policy.
Is 103 non-discrimination for students?
Yes.
Yes. Is there anything particularly noteworthy, or does this pretty much then reflect what's contained in 103?
I think it makes it consistent and very similar to 103 in terms of the language, the process, the investigative reporting, naming of how to file a complaint, how it will be responded to. So I think it's a nice counterpart to what we have in place with very similar language.
None of the language changes look significant or substantial.
No, and again, it's so similar to all the work that we did on 103 that it becomes like a mirror image of that just on the employment side.
Mary Ann?
I'm just curious if I'm reading this correctly. It looks like under authority in the first paragraph, we're striking genetic information, but yet I see it referenced further down
Ah, I see.
in the second paragraph. Right?
Yes. I believe that should remove that strike through.
So here, should genetic information be included or not?
I would include it since it's included in the paragraph below.
It's my key.
I think it's a good idea.
All right, put it back in.
Thank you.
Did you used to be a teacher or something? I was checking.
I'm gonna pause just a minute to see if we can get another person in the room. I'll make good use looking at some of these. And the ones that we're looking at tonight, are there any that have very significant changes?
No. All very minor. Some have no changes, other than that which PSBA has recommended. So 302, 306, no, not 306, 302, 307, 308, and 314. I'm not recommending any changes beyond what PSBA has recommended. And in the others, there's just some minor things that I want to walk you through that I've updated.
Okay. I noticed employment of substitutes, and you've done a lot of work to improve our program there.
So when we look at that policy, you'll see that the language is reflective of what we do here in Council Rock. So it specifically speaks to that we hire only long-term professional substitutes and all support substitutes. Because currently we have our partnership with ESS for the per diem professional substitutes. So I wanted to make sure that our policy reflected that that's not with us. So when we walk through those changes, I can show you how I wordsmithed it. And we might want to craft it a little differently, but I wanted to make sure I'm capturing what we do.
What's the ratio of long-term to per diem generally? In terms of, when we're filling, I guess it's sort of obvious that you fill a position with a long-term substitute where able, where it's predictable, and per diem is just when it's the unpredictable illness. We call our long-term substitutes on the professional side full-time substitutes, and that's anything over 90 calendar days.
So sometimes you know upfront that an absence will be over 90 calendar days, but there are times where an absence begins shorter, but then circumstances will push it into that threshold. When they move into that 90-day threshold, they actually become part of the bargaining unit. And then the collective bargaining agreement then speaks to the conditions of employment.
Thank you. Okay. Well, let's then look at, where are we? No, we're still
We're
at
still at
104.
When you stepped out, Mr. Blocker,
yeah.
I had explained that Rob Cox actually reviewed and edited this policy because of all of the work that we had done with Eastburn and Gray on policy 103,
Right.
Non-discrimination for students. We
Right.
wanted to make sure that this was
Good.
a mirror image and consistent with all the work that had been done.
Are those changes reflected in what we have here?
Yes. So you're looking at the work of Rob Cox and his thorough review to this policy.
Well, it's great to have two legal minds plus PSBA weighing in on this.
Very true.
It seems to be an area of interest or expertise, Guy and Gray.
Any questions?
No, oh, sorry.
I'm just giving Andy a minute.
I'm good.
All right, 104 rather, will then move forward to the full board for its consideration. 302.
302 is very simple. We are not looking at any changes to this other than what CSBA has recommended.
And the superintendent has reviewed this?
He has, yes.
Good. GSBA changes. It doesn't change the length of the term.
The CSBA changes include district superintendent and assistant superintendent, and speaks to the language additions. If you scroll, I'll have Matt. Scroll up, I mean, for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Um,
So when you see, come down a tiny bit, the addition here is about the assistant superintendent and how that contract comes into being, how the board will vote. If we continue looking down at the bolded parts that have been added
Yeah.
to this policy. How employment contracts for both of those appointments will be laid out, what will be included. The language that we'll see in a few other policies tonight speak about certain required forms and clearances that all employees need to have. Also talks about the removal of the assistant or the superintendent severance.
So we're going from this policy to this one right here.
We're now at
We don't want to be here.
302.
So are we bound by 3 to 5 years? Is that a state requirement?
I don't know if it's a state requirement. I could find out.
Because I'd want to leave the board flexibility.
I had a similar question about, at a regular board meeting occurring at least 150 days prior to the expiration.
Yeah, it says right here in the statute, board shall elect or approve a properly qualified district superintendent into a contract to serve a term of 3 to 5 years.
I'm sorry, what, does it say generally 3 to 5 years or?
No,
No general one at all.
3 to 5. A public meeting occurring at least 90 days prior to the expiration.
Now, that says 90 days and this says 150.
My guess is the 150 is in there for the district. Give them time to find a qualified candidate.
But we have the right to be 90 if we wanted to?
That's
I
what
would-
it
law is
is
like-
here.
I would say it'd be 90 to give the board if the board ever needed it or wanted it. for time.
Because as this reads, if it says at least 150,
Yeah.
then it's a minimum of 150.
At least.
Yeah, I would go with the state law.
It's not-
And I don't know how you feel about that, but I think that just gives the board flexibility.
Yeah, the 150 seems excessive.
It does seem a long time.
And say, kind of a two-way street, it gives the superintendent more flexibility and
Mhm.
opportunity for a good dialogue.
So at least 90 days prior to the expiration?
Yeah.
Let me see if it's-
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at, the public meeting occurring at least 90 days.
Yeah, that was the time frame in the existing policy, so maybe that was something negotiated with the prior superintendent.
Well, maybe.
I wonder because PSBA leaves it untouched, what the rationale is behind the 150.
My guess is if it was in our old policy and it
Mhm.
wasn't less than the 90,
They left it alone.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because that's our prerogative, but.
I mean, it 150, right, kind of forces you to plan, be a little bit more planful, but it also forces your hand a little bit. So I say leave it at 90.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate it.
So, it seems like this spreads the state law, but does this, any change we make gets run past Rob Cox? No?
I would ask just to run this one past him, and I want to just look at it a little more closely, because I don't know it as well as I'd like to before making the change, if that's okay.
All right, well, that's our, yeah, that's our recommendation, and,
So
if there's any,
if you hear back from Rob before the board meeting in November, because these will go before the.
Right.
Oh, I'm sure I will.
Between now and then,
yeah,
then I'll include it on the board for approval.
right.
Yeah, I'll check with him tomorrow.
Yeah, great.
And are you satisfied with 90? I mean, you can make it 120. Would you prefer 90?
I like 90.
Okay.
I mean, there's nothing to stop the board from doing it 150 days out.
Right.
It's just that it does, Sandy said, tire you. That's 3 to 5 years by state law.
Okay, I will check on
I
that.
have one question around not assistant, acting.
Mhm.
So really, unless I'm reading, missing something, it's only one small sentence. It says, in the event the board appoints an acting superintendent or assistant superintendent, the board shall approve improvement document, recruitment and assessment procedures be used permanently fill such vacancy in accordance with board policies. That's what it's all it says about that. It says if we need to, that they won't serve longer than 1 year. So am I to take that to read that if we find ourselves in a situation, then we have to create a bunch of stuff? And then we can only have that person in for 1 year?
An acting?
As an acting, I think that's a.
Now, is 1 year, is a 1 year,
Where,
Yeah, where-
where is that? Where do you see that?
sorry, it's
Move it.
under authority, the bottom 2 paragraphs?
Yeah, it's up top. Up top. Right there.
Yeah, it says the event, so whenever the board finds it possible or practical to immediately fill a vacancy.
No longer than 1 year, that's state law, yeah.
Not longer than 1 year. Yep, state law.
So what happens, I guess, if we had to go to an active and we couldn't either sign that person full time, we didn't, we couldn't come up with a 3 to 5 year solution.
Yeah,
Are we allowed to re-up that one person?
That's a Rob Cox question.
Can find out.
or are there any specific criteria that we use around an acting superintendent or assistant? Is that all, would we kind of revert to everything that's in place for full-time person, other than we should probably have to have a contract, right?
I would think so. In my limited experience with acting, I've seen an employment contract, but I can ask the question.
And so the two questions are, if, for me anyway, if we have to go with a part-time or an acting, are we limited to 1 year, or do we actually renew that person or extend that person? And then the second piece is all the documentation, interview, paperwork, guidelines, all that kind of stuff. Does that process need to be rewritten, or does it follow the guidelines that we're approving as part of this policy, or is there something else? That make sense?
I'm not sure I understand.
I'm looking at that last paragraph. So in the event the board appoints an acting, the board shall approve and document the recruitment and assessment procedures to be used to permanently fill such vacancy in accordance with board policy.
Oh, yeah,
So that's focused on.
that just means if
full-time.
you've got an acting superintendent in place, you still have to be actively trying to fill the position.
Got it, okay. But so in terms of how we would fill an acting
I don't read this, nor do I believe that you have to follow the process that you would
we
to
just
hire.
say, oh, we
hire a
we're gonna pick
superintendent.
somebody.
But I do believe that when the person is acting, you're supposed to be actively searching.
Right. Okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I guess my question is, the acting, do they have to meet the same requirements as a superintendent? Or
They
do
would have to have their letter of eligibility and have, the qualifications for the job, but might not have the same things that you're looking for in the final appointment.
But they technically have to have the same paperwork, and
So some districts have,
so it wouldn't be like, hey, we got this great, be just real, provocative to make the point. And we got a great teacher who we think can do the job in the meantime, so we're gonna put them, or not, we get somebody from the private sector, they're gonna be our temporary, we can't do that.
You would have to have a letter of eligibility from PDE to be a superintendent, even an acting superintendent. But there are places that have executive directors, CFOs, other types of positions. But if it's a superintendent acting or not, you would have to have that letter.
So then to fill the breach, if we needed to, we could appoint somebody to be executive director or something without filling the superintendent position, is what you're saying?
I think what you have to have is you have to have at least one person who
Yeah.
has a supervisory certificate or the superintendent certification, because there are some documents that can only be signed by someone with that letter.
Superintendent.
So some districts have an executive director, and then they have an assistant superintendent. And the assistant superintendent fills that role.
Because that person has the letter of service.
Right, they can sign the documents, but the executive director still runs the business.
Yeah, I just maybe ask Rob Cox, is there any language in there that we need to guide our selection of an acting super or assistant, and that's any different than, finding the actual?
We'll check with them, but I believe that the answer is that it's not the same search process, but you do need the certificate.
I'm not saying the same search process, I'm just saying the same criteria, on paper.
I will absolutely ask him. I believe that your answer is yes.
Okay. Well, if it means yes, it means yes.
Yeah, okay, that's it.
That's 302. Mary Ann, anything else?
No, thank you.
Andy?
Yes, sir.
All right, 302, we'll go forward to the full board when we satisfy those questions.
I just had a question, figure out, haven't you been doing that, like, if there are questions before they all suddenly show up on?
Yes.
You guys just do a quick follow-up during the week?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, sure, that's what we've been doing. I'm trying to find 3 or 4, I figured it out.
No, that's what I'm looking for.
My apologies.
We look at it on the screen,
Right.
there's a very, couple of very simple changes that I can walk you
Great.
through. So you'll notice in red, my addition here is I wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that absolutely the school board approves employment, sets compensation in terms of employment, but that it is in accordance with our collective bargaining agreement. So that we don't have the right to unilaterally set a wage or a working condition, that it is guided by the bargaining agreement. So that's one change that I have included.
When you say district staff, is that everybody? Or wouldn't that apply to Act 93 or?
So you have here, it does call it out, administrative, professional, and support employee employed by the district in accordance with the collective bargaining agreement.
So we could pick one.
So you have for your administrative group, and we could word this differently, you have your,
Because I know some of the administrative team, has contracts versus following the collective bargaining agreements. Is it our discretion who has a contract, or is that also directed by state law?
it is, so your contracted employees are your business manager, HR, superintendent, assistant superintendent, all others fall under Act 93.
And then that's state law, so that's not up to us.
Your principals, your supervisory personnel. There are districts that have employees that are called non-classified. You would see some of those in Central Bucks, and those are not support staff, not supervisory, but we don't have that here. We're not structured that way.
With this, if we, again, if we want to bring in a job that is something that our existing staff didn't do, but when we want to bring it in outside of Act 93, does this preclude us from negotiating something or working on?
I don't believe so. I think it just speaks to what you have today.
So we could just change the policy if we wanted to. I guess we could change the policy if we wanted to.
I don't think this policy would disrupt you from doing that. Now, we could wordsmith this language a little bit to say, the board shall by a majority of vote approve employment, set compensation, establish the term of employment for administrative, professional, and support employees in accordance with existing employment agreements. I just think you have to have that language in there.
Oh, I completely agree with that. I think that's a great add. I just was wondering if that tied our hands if we wanted to do something.
I don't think so. And even with the Act 93 group, it's a meet and discuss, so that you don't have to have the agreement of that group in order to put that into place. Ideally, you would want to, but with our other two groups of employees, you do have to have that agreement.
So that's the only change.
No, there are just a couple minor others. So as we scroll down, you will see I removed this language here that talks about how we post for diversification and professional advancement, because I just don't think it's necessary language. All of our openings are made known to our employees as part of our practice, and is in all of our collective bargaining agreements.
Okay.
I just thought it was clunky. It just didn't make a lot of sense. That's only my opinion, so it can certainly be
Well,
put back in.
it's amusing in that it says staff vacancies that represent opportunities for professional advancement or diversification. And that's presuming that staff vacancies that don't
Yeah, I didn't like
offer
it.
that, yeah.
That's why I took it out, but again, that was a decision on my part alone, so.
Well, we are required, aren't we, by state law to publicly post job vacancies?
Well, I don't know if that's state law, but I know, in our support staff agreement and our teacher agreement with our professional staff, we have language that says how we'll post, how all staff will be notified.
Huh.
We also have language that ensures that our staff have opportunity to apply to the openings that exist. And the other changes that I'm recommending is I struck the language for personal care assistants because we don't employ personal care assistants and we don't employ interpreters.
And we're not going to employ them.
If we were, personal care assistants, I think, would not be something that we were seeking to add. I think you can take that out safely.
Okay.
Often personal care assistants, when within a bargaining unit, fall under the same pay and work rules and work conditions as your instructional assistants. So I think it's just redundant.
Okay.
And interpreters, we would get through the IU. I don't think we'd want to be looking to in-house our interpreters.
Can you just scroll down just a little bit so we can get a look at that, those sections no, the other way, sorry.
Can you scroll up?
Sorry. All right, just want to read Title I requirements down.
So what this means, just to simplify it, is our instructional assistants that work in the special ed realm or in Title I have to have 2 years of study post-high school, an associate's degree, so you could have 2 years of study after high school, an associate's degree or a higher degree. If you don't have one or two, then you have to pass this, what they call a rigorous assessment. And that's a series of tests that are given so that you may be qualified to do that job.
This is state law, or is this?
It's
council
Chapter
right, right?
14, it's universal across the state.
Is that good enough for us?
I think it's very good. It does pose a little bit of challenge sometimes when you have those that may not have that post-high school education and are interested in working as a teacher assistant, but we are able to help them meet that rigorous standard through different things that are available.
Marianne?
No, I'm good.
All right, this 304 will move forward to the full board for its consideration. 305.
Okay, on 305.
Okay.
Yeah, we have it.
So I wordsmithed 305 a bit to show who is covered by this policy. So right now, our professional per diem substitutes are employed through a third party. They're employed through ESS, formerly Source for Teachers, now ESS. So I added that sentence that shows up on the screen. You'll see it's in red, that the district will employ long-term substitute professionals in positions greater than 90 calendar days, and will also employ support substitutes in both the per diem and long-term capacity. So my intention there was just to capture who is actually covered by the policy. I wanted to make sure to make the distinction so as there's no confusion that a per diem sub that works for ESS is covered by their policy. And then I also made an addition. If we scroll down a little bit further, you'll see highlighted that substitutes, this has said substitutes will be paid on a per diem basis set periodically by the school board. I added in accordance with the bargaining agreement or as set by the school board, because we do have language in our bargaining agreement that does touch on this. So I wanted to make sure that we included that.
The bargaining agreement for CREA speaks to the pay rate of per diem substitutes.
It speaks to the pay rate as soon as they hit the 90-day threshold.
That's what I thought I heard you say earlier, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe it's not necessary as I look at it to put it there.
Is that typically more than the per diem basis?
They're paid on scale once it hits 90 days.
And not doing that would put us at risk for talent and continuity.
Well, we've bargained that's the threshold, 90 calendar days for a substitute to become part of the association.
Oh, okay.
And then they're then paid on scale, have full benefits.
But this says in the green, under 90 calendar days.
Which is the per diem.
That references per diem.
Yeah, but they're not covered by the collective bargaining.
Yeah, it says or on a per diem basis. That references the per diem basis, I believe.
It's just a little
The reason why, and I just want to think this through with you as a group. So I put that language in because our full-time substitutes, when they hit that 90-day mark, are paid in accordance with the bargaining agreement. When they're not, then it's set by the school board. And I feel like this policy touches on all of it. Because I have in that first sentence, if we scroll back up, the district will employ long-term professional substitutes in positions greater than 90 days and will also employ. So that's why when we scroll down, I wasn't making this clear.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
probably consolidate those, just say substitutes shall be paid on a per diem basis unless covered by, probably just consolidate something green in there to.
Yeah.
Shall be paid in accordance with the collective bargaining agreements. Or,
Or,
I would just say,
Yeah,
I would say per diem basis first. Substitutes shall be paid, on a per diem basis, that periodically board, or where
In
collective
accordance
bargaining
with the
agreements supersede.
Or in accordance with collective
Or in
bargaining
accordance
agreement.
with.
Yeah, that sounds better.
I got it that way.
Only because per diem's the priority, because they come in that way, so you put that.
Yeah,
substitute
substitute.
Under rate set.
Make that clear.
Yes.
That doesn't rub anybody wrong over the
No,
other.
no,
that's-
A little more clear.
No, and that's
Yeah.
obviously since it happens consecutively from one to the other, it makes sense to put that first.
I actually didn't realize that
On a per
substitutes.
diem basis. Yeah. I don't
Yeah,
know if
so,
it's clear
yeah,
that-
move that.
You got it. Or in accordance with. Or in accordance.
Yeah, delete the ad.
And Mary Ann, the whole piece about not being able to use your fire use as substitutes, that's all state law, right?
That's not our policy. That's state law.
Teachers' requirements, but when, with the, partnering with ESS, that goes away because they're
Right,
not
then they're
double
employed by
dipping.
them, they're not by the district.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons to go with them.
Kind of a workaround, really.
We're doing, 97%.
Yeah, I saw that. Is there something else changing in the world, or this new company is better?
The district manager that they assigned to us, he works day and night, night and day, weekends. He is unbelievable.
Well, the substitutes, what we need.
I believe so.
Yeah, it looks good for me.
He has,
With a period
some
added.
complaints, but they're minimal. When you look at the total population against the complaints, minimal. And he is instituted along with me when there are issues, that he goes to the school and sits with the sub and the principal and talks with them, like, here's what happened. And then we make the decision in partnership whether or not they should continue. You have to try to give substitutes when it's not something egregious a chance, because it's a very hard day-to-day life. But I can't say enough about Steve and what the energy and the commitment he's brought. It's just that they need somebody all the time on it.
That's great.
Yeah.
We've seen it's a statewide problem.
He deserves so much praise, and we're early on, and I'm really happy with what we're seeing.
Well, that might be one, if we've got a track record of 6 to 8 months, get into the spring. If that's impact on classroom and morale, wouldn't be a bad idea to bring them in and recognize it if they're maintaining that level of performance over time.
That would be really nice, yeah.
Good idea. I think Matt got it the way you were suggesting, Andy and Mary Ann.
That looks good.
All right.
It's like Christmas.
Yay. All right. Are we
Okay,
good with 305?
Yeah.
All right, 305, moving on to the full board for consideration. 306.
okay, 306, the changes here are very, very minimal. I added language to be reflective of ESY and summer school. We have two distinct programs in the summer. One is called summer school, the other is called ESY. So first paragraph just speaks to extended school year, also known as ESY. Down a little further under delegation of responsibility, also spells out extended school year.
Extended school year, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
That supports students who've got academic challenges.
ESY is run through special services, so I believe it's for students that are within different programs in special ed.
To qualify them for extended instruction beyond the normal school year.
Got it.
I do have a question about the part that you struck out for priority consideration. Could you explain the rationale for that? Do you see where I am, Christine?
Yeah, Max, it is what we do in practice.
Mhm.
I don't know that you necessarily have to have it in the policy, because it does restrict you a bit.
And I was also curious, we're striking that, which only references summer school, then I would assume that remains the practice for ESY, that candidates within the staff would be considered first for those positions.
When ESY comes out, we do post it internally first, and then externally if we need to.
Mhm.
For the teacher assistants, they do have language in the PRESPA agreement that says, it's very loose language that says while consideration will be given, it's not guaranteed. I know some of the reasons why I struck this is we do run into challenges sometimes where, I can give you a real life example. So say someone is on a year-long leave. The person who was in for the year has formed a relationship with the students. They are doing really well. Those same students are going to go to ESY. Our desire is to have that person remain for the summer with those students. The teacher who's coming back, welcome back with open arms at the start of the school year. But when you have language like this, it makes it almost impossible for us to say, no, you missed a full year. We'd like to, for continuity for the students, we'd like to keep the substitute who's not maybe a member of the staff at that point because the assignment has ended, the opportunity.
That makes sense. But again, this only references summer school, doesn't reference ESY, which,
ESY, those are all my additions. So I didn't add it there because I struck it.
You think it should be in there, Marianne?
well, I understand the point you're making, and obviously everybody wants to see good continuity and the best staff members working with students. So just help me think this through. In striking this, is it more consistent with the current practice?
The current practice is we place all of the internal staff, and we feel like there are times where we would prefer to make another choice. Not often, but there are times. I think if we were to put it back, because I can understand why you would pause on that. I think it's worded in a way where we could still justify going in a different direction.
This would not preclude you from hiring someone who is not currently on staff.
Yeah, the word is consideration, it's not.
Right.
Or,
You could leave it and we could still argue our point.
I don't know how anyone else
The word
feels.
primary,
Consideration.
Mhm.
because I always err in being flexible
Mhm.
for the district.
And I agree, and
I
I see
don't
them.
want to send it, I think you're thinking we send an unintended message there, which I don't think we are.
I agree, but I guess I would also be in favor of sending the message that in some way we would want to consider our permanent staff
Right.
first.
Could we change it to consideration? Shall we
And just
give
strike
them-
primary, would that suit?
Yeah, that'd be good.
all right, strike primary, start with consideration, add ESY,
Yes.
and we'll restore that sentence. You can do it, I'm sure you can.
I don't mind doing that if you want me to.
Christine, will that suit you?
It absolutely does.
Just put stat there and.
That's not the question.
And then you want to add
Summer
ESY.
school one and
An extended.
summer school and extended school year.
However you got worded up top. I would imagine.
All right, are we good with 306?
Thank you.
Okay, it'll move to the full board, 307.
307 looks good, and the changes that PSBA has recommended, it is in accordance with how we place and accept student teachers now. It's perfect as it is. I also take a look at, other districts and to see if, have they accepted the PSBA changes or have they made refinements for this one? It looks like this in many other Bucks County districts.
Good. That's a good practice.
So as I'm skimming through the back of the paragraphs with the background checks, all the checks that we're doing are, they're just as, in-depth as we're doing for normal staff.
We're very vigilant with our background clearances for student teachers, for all staff.
And are they, is it the discretion of the teacher they work with, whether they're in the classroom alone or teaching alone?
They really shouldn't be there alone because they're there to be working with the teacher.
So I guess the question would be for a student teacher that happens to be in a class where the teacher is leaving a period at the end of the day regularly for coaching assignments. Does that work?
It should not be. There's a limitation to how, so recently due to the substitute shortage, PDE will allow a student to substitute, but only for 20 hours. They have to have 60 completed college credits in education. And if they have the 60 completed credits, they may substitute for only 20 hours. So I'm guessing.
But just for quality of education we want to deliver here, if there was, you know, imagine if you got a teacher who's leaving 50% of the time, 20% of the class hours for extracurricular, let's call it. I guess they wouldn't have a student teacher so regularly that impacts all the time, like a semester.
They're only here for a semester. They should be at all times with another teacher for a variety of reasons. So if
Let's
you,
take offline.
yeah, we take it way offline to talk that more through.
All right. Any other comments or questions about policy? No?
No.
All right, we'll move 307 onto the full board. 308,
308, no changes are recommended beyond that which CSBA has suggested.
What's amazing to see policy is dated 1997.
It's been a little while since we reviewed it.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Is this all state law?
Mm-hmm.
Then going back to the question, do we need it? Mike's not here, so I'll ask that question.
My opinion is it's helpful. It's from an HR perspective, for my practice, it's helpful to be able to say,
That's all I need to
you know,
hear.
here's a link, you can read. We do that more often than not.
Good. Well, the other thing,
If it's helpful to how you guys run the district.
yeah. Well, and the other thing that we've talked about is that it's somewhere the public can go to see what state law says.
From a quick perspective, could you imagine the book that Rob brings to the board meeting?
Oh, yeah.
Could you imagine you're here?
Yeah.
What's nice too is that because we can so readily get to policies in other districts too, it's nice to be able to see, you know, maybe as a parent or a community member, oh wow, this is the same everywhere.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay,
And that number 3 is kind of that employee you referenced that we don't have any of. Don't fall in Act 93 or some non-certificated administrative and support employees.
Look at that non-classified
That's
group.
okay.
Or me as the HR director, business manager, we would be considered that non-certificated as well.
Okay.
You're in the Act 93.
We'll get you a certificate.
You're in a class,
What kind of
you're in a
certificate
class,
do you want? What
you're in
kind
a
of
class by
certificate do you
yourself,
want?
Matt.
Okay, so for policy 309,
I have something on
did I
that one.
skip? I'm sorry.
yeah, that's all right.
I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
Are we still on 308?
I'm sorry, I thought we had gone to 309. I'm
We,
good with
we
308.
just had to set that out loud.
Sorry, I'm
All right,
good with
we're moving
308.
on with 308, so now
Sorry,
we're
Mr.
at 309.
That's my fault.
So may I ask a question?
Sure.
in the new 309 policy, it says that employees shall be informed of their assignments no later than August 15th. But I think the contract has language which says they'll be informed by the last day of school. I know that had been the practice, and I believe we still have contract language on that.
And let me check. August 15th is for our support staff. The reason for that inclusion there is teacher assistants can't be placed until we know the student
sure.
population.
Mhm.
So it's impossible to commit to the exact assignments. I will very quickly take a look. And in practice, we do let our teachers know before the last day of school. So we could just wordsmith this,
So it
actually.
says no later than August 15th, so if you let them know before the last day of school, you're still in compliance with the policy.
Right, which is, the August 15th is to capture that need to have until then for the TA placements. I agree with you,
For
Madam.
support staff, okay. And
Well, and if it's in the contract, then it
that
supersedes
supersedes
this.
the policy.
Yeah,
But-
that's a good question, Mary.
And then I also, there's a very small change in the second paragraph. When we bring to the school board, we don't bring building transfers. So, for example, if I teach English at Holland Middle School, I want to go over to Newtown Middle. That process goes very smoothly. I move over. We don't typically bring that through personnel actions, but we will bring any change in assignment. So if I'm going to go from English to special ed at a new school, we would put that on. If I'm going to go from second grade to ISP, we typically, so before I made that change, it read that every building transfer would come in front of you. So I just changed it to the word and.
Yeah,
And that's it.
okay. Andy, Marianne, 309, good?
Yes, thank you.
All right, we'll move to the full board, 311, suspensions and furloughs.
Once again, I think a lot of the language, especially for furloughs, is state language.
It is, and with.
And didn't that just recently change?
It did recently change. I did look at other districts, this policy, just to see how much they had finessed it from what PSBA had recommended, very much in its entirety on many, many districts' websites. I made very minor adjustments. I did strike through, the district shall realign its professional staff to ensure more senior employees are provided. I won't read the whole thing. I struck that because I just don't think that it's needed here.
Is that because our collective bargaining agreement talks about how we move staff?
Yes, and I also think it's, it's speaking to an issue that might not be occurring here in Council Rock. In a large district, there are concentrations of seniority in certain buildings by geographic desirability. Our buildings tend to be pretty balanced in terms of seniority. We don't have schools that are heavy in junior teachers and more in senior teachers. We can leave the language in because as a district, we are charged with looking at that and making adjustments should there be a need. I just don't know that we.
And I think that is a management prerogative anyway. I mean, there is no such thing as building seniority, so teachers could be moved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really defer to somebody else's expertise on that.
Yeah, I think deleting where it's not necessary is a good idea. Is that data requirement acceptable, data necessary for computation of each, not, is that reasonable?
Where do you see that at? I'm sorry.
There's two lines that have data necessary for computation.
Oh, that's all fine. We don't-
Okay,
yeah.
it's not onerous,
No.
all right. Okay, 311, anybody?
The only just this word's rubbing on me wrong. The word suspended. Let's move past that, unless anybody else thinks there's an easy way to fix it. I just think we're talking about a school setting and we're using the word suspended. It's just- I mean, I get your employment is suspended.
And
it doesn't bug me as much as the word certificated.
Because I guess
That
like,
sounds like it's a made-up word.
when we furlough people, they're gonna come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get it. The
Yeah.
technical meaning of the word is fine. I'm just reacting to it.
Yeah, I don't like it at all.
Well, as long as our folks don't.
the irony of
As
the-
long as they don't.
All right, 311, we'll move on to the full board for its consideration. 314, physical examination.
This is, absolutely fine as it stands. Since the dawn of time, school district employees have been required to do a physical and a tuberculosis test as, when they enter a district as a new employee. So this just is good updates made by PSBA to a longstanding requirement.
I like the addition of the certified nurse practitioner and LPN.
Mm-hmm.
But the TB is the only one, the only condition. Everything else would be doctor, client, doctor, patient.
Well, there's a form. So
Right?
there's an official PA health form that
Okay.
that is completed. It has an immunization record, a series
Okay.
of questions, height, weight.
And those records are not public.
They're in the HR office. They don't leave the office.
I like the idea that medical records are kept separate.
They are.
Is that all paper stuff?
It is, as of today, all paper.
which I'm happy about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet.
We,
So Christine's supposed to have to go find something.
well, we upload, this is not the forum, but we use Munis to upload a large majority of
Okay.
documents, into the system. But there are certain things that exist in paper. So the health form is one of the forms that we don't upload. But everyone's clearances, certification, those types of things are uploaded.
So the board may require an employee to undergo a physical examination at the board's request.
Well, I can think of a case where that may be necessary. But if you don't feel that that's necessary?
No, I just
Right,
think I find it interesting that that's.
Yeah.
You think about employee, different
So here's where that could come into play.
disability.
It could come into play in a variety of ways. So when I think back to my time in the school district of Philadelphia where they had a doctor on staff. So there would be times where a person was needing to come back to work. So that doctor would see employees. I'm trying to think of anything here.
Well, a
that
person
might
comes
be-
walking through the halls looking like they have Ebola and they just say, I got a cold. I mean, that's,
So here you have medical. If you click on the actual, on the number one there,
This one?
yeah, it speaks to districts that do have doctors on staff. Yeah, it does help us at
Yep.
times.
yeah, I'm good.
Yes.
I can see,
I
could be superintendent or designated.
That's exactly what I'm wondering is the board has and then also sort of a confidentiality issue. Why would the board be deciding if somebody needs a physical examination? Shouldn't that be?
Yeah, let's leave it how it is. Yeah. I think that's good, Council Marion.
What? Are we leaving it as is?
Yeah.
Well, unless you strongly object,
No.
I can just envision where that might be necessary.
Oh, I do too,
Mhm.
but,
It has school board here because right, if you look at a code, it says that school boards may require.
all right,
So you only have the right, so maybe we would seek you out to seek that
yeah,
authorization.
that's what I was talking about, Mary. So, yeah, all right. All right, so we're good with 314. It'll go on to the school board. And the final one for
And,
tonight,
HIV infection is, again, CSBA additions are absolutely fine. I like some of the language talks about education, training, creating understanding. It's good language, I think, that protects the district and the individual.
There's similar policy relative to students.
I don't know, I don't know. Good look.
I think yeah, there's an HIV policy for students. Remember, we had that debate about communicable diseases, and Jerry kept mentioning stuff. I don't remember which number it is, I do remember the conversation.
Yeah.
Chuck was here.
Just as long as there's a reference, check to make sure they're consistent, if they need to be aware.
okay. 314.1 will go on to the full board. Thank you, Ms. Taylor.
Thank you.
Policies to retire. We already discussed
So,
that. Want to hear the list again, or? We good with that? All right, public comment, hearing none. Board comment, hearing none. I guess.
Actually,
Yeah, please.
literally, I mean, naming policy, is that on the agenda?
I discussed, no.
I know it didn't come up somewhere.
Yeah, and I brought it up with Robert,
Right.
last week, and he feels like the existing naming policy is sufficient. But I'm, we're open at any time to suggestions. I mean, I think prior discussion had to do with adding some sort of limitations.
Well, I just think based on the last conversation that we had, conversations that we had, I think there wasn't policy to help guide anything, and because the board was, not completely aligned on what we wanted to do, that made for a tough conversation. So I think, and the other thing was, we kind of wanted to move, or there was an appetite to move, to do something there. So I think in the absence of policy, if we ever did get a desire to move quickly, and then there wasn't, kind of a vast majority of the board, because one good idea could spark another one, and,
Yeah, well, so, for example.
I just think it needs to be there in the case that we get to something, because I think as we get better about fundraising, naming is going to come up.
Yeah, would you, for example, like to see something in the policy that says, that speaks to a committee?
It might be worthwhile, and let's see who has a passion for it. I can think of a couple who might, but maybe just send out an email to the board, just, for informational purposes, send to you, not to everybody, not for debate, what you might like to see in a naming policy, and then maybe we can consolidate that and have that drive a discussion about what's what, because I bet there's a lot of different things in there. Is it based on, does financial trump somebody who, a community type figure? Do you have to have an open waiting period to go have, a light candidate?
TSBA recommended removing the naming policy.
Yep, and they suggested making it an AR, and I said to Robert, no way. Not this board, based on our recent experience. So it ought to.
What's our policy? Did they say why? I'm interested why.
Policy is how the procedure will not recommend policy, recommend placing an administrative regulation. I can go down here and see if there's any further detail.
I wouldn't have a problem with that either, as long as there was something that we all, had some input on, although I guess if you got a board, they would say, we don't like the administrative breaks, so the answer is no.
All right, so when we get to the 700,
All right.
should we include it for review, or would you like to?
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and do what Andy suggested.
Okay,
I'd just be interested to hear other people's thoughts if you consolidated those down.
Yeah.
Maybe you could play those back to us at the next policy meeting.
Yeah.
Or even, maybe, if we had a light agenda, we could have a quick board discussion about it. Maybe see what you get back first before you thought.
Well, yeah, and I also will point out to people that PSBA has made that recommendation,
But I mean, the other, and again, I'm sensitive to sponsorships, so if we had somebody that wanted to come in and give us a, $250,000 honorarium for scholarships or whatever, but they wanted their name on a building, their family's name on a building, would we say yes just because of the money? Or we would say, hey, no, this name, has no grounding in the district, or is there anybody else in the district who might have more money?
well, and you saw what
How do we
happened.
handle those things?
You saw what happened at Abington.
Right.
Oh, that's right,
That big mess. Did you see what that gentleman did the last couple of days?
No.
He gave MIT a gift of astronomical proportions. I'll look it up.
I can't remember redistrict him into our.
Yeah, yeah. We just need an alumnus to strike it rich on Wall Street. So, all right, I'll follow through. I like that suggestion.
I had mentioned to you, before, we had each briefly spoken about, I know there was a policy for use of the facilities. And while I understand that there's a policy in place, I would just appreciate a discussion among board members about what is the process for that policy. We had spoken about it before, so I'm just calling it back to our minds.
And does the Chancellor Center include government entities, all that kind of stuff?
Right, I think I would appreciate a conversation being more clear about the parameters for acceptable use of our facilities.
Yeah, I looked at the policy after that discussion, and it's pretty broad.
Right,
And doesn't speak to certain types of use.
exactly.
So.
And I neither prohibited or allowed, yeah.
And is dollar figures, is that administrative reg, Matt, do you know?
yes, we set the rate,
Okay, so that's got nothing to do with policy.
The rate set primarily based on cost to the district, or?
Based on my,
And who makes, it says who makes the decision?
I know that the last time we did a change in fees, Market had, I'm not sure if it was, I know Pauline did the research, but I'm not sure if Doug was intimately involved in it or not. But Pauline did research on fee usage in other districts. He came back and said, this is what other districts are charging. We moved our fees to be closer to what some of the other districts were. Not 100% in alignment with them, but I don't know that cost has ever been factored into what we charge.
we do a lot of in-kind stuff to local organizations.
Yeah.
I'd just be interested in, so here's another good one. So, a certain famous football coach who might not be in the favor of the fans of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Last week, wanted to come take a look at, one of the kids at North, and they wanted to land a helicopter
He did that.
on the fields, and, that came back to, ultimately, I think the superintendent made the decision, came back to the board about, hey, what do you think? So, we either leave it to the administration to make those calls themselves, and then whoever they get advice from, or if we want to be more specific, and then, so specific to the helicopter thing, I happen to be, if somebody asked my opinion, I said, hey, you got the safety thing covered, are they covering all the costs? And is this something that, gets offered to, anybody else that wants to do it? But the big thing for me was safety and cost, and is that the game not being structured around them. Those were my criteria. I'm not sure I would put those in, but, those might be things that we want to say, hey, it's got to be, equal and open to all. There's got to be a specific cost for what we do. We've got to be able to have safety. It can't be a disruption. It's got to be consistent with all of our policies around free speech and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, well, I had experience with that in Chicago because we had a big arena that was regularly rented by a very controversial political figure. And the university, being a public university, had no choice in terms of renting to somebody who had all the proper insurance and so forth. And that proved to be problematic. So, you know, somebody could come here and say, we want to use this facility for this purpose.
Well, maybe, I think it was the three of us who had had the conversation about wanting, versus another subset of the board. Maybe we take a look at it together and see if there's something that we want to do, and then bring that forward to the board. That would involve you guys having to do that.
I'd be grateful for that.
Yeah, all right.
And obviously you guys would have, somebody over there would have to be involved, give us some expert, probably Robert. So,
That'd be-
yeah, Matt.
It is an interesting question, and it could come up again
I'm sure it will.
in a year or so.
Well, it
People
actually,
farming-
a couple years ago.
Yeah, I know,
Residential.
Yeah.
I remember.
Mhm.
God help us. All right, meeting adjourned, thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.